everyone. Today I have with me Jessica. She is someone who is working at the UofC to bring menstrual product accessibility to life there. And her and Alicia have developed this grant proposal for a pilot project that began in 2018, where the Students' Union started a free menstrual product accessibility program to address period poverty on campus. And so far, the program has received over $61,000 in funding from the Students' Union Quality Money Program, which is super exciting. And we're here to just jump right in and hear Jessica tell her story about how she got involved with the movement towards period equity and what the experience has been like so far. So to just start things off, Jessica, what are you studying, and could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Jessica Revington. I'm currently an undergraduate student at the University of Calgary. My background is actually in nursing. I graduated with my BN in 2018, also from the University of Calgary, and I'm currently pursuing a second degree in biological sciences, also at the University of Calgary.
Very cool. So to begin, we'll do something a little fun and lighthearted. I'm going to show you two different period memes, and I want you to just react to it first and then rate it on whether it's relatable and whether you find it funny or not.
Sounds good.
Okay, one sec. Here's the first one.
Well, first of all, I love One Direction, love Harry Styles. I feel like this is very relatable. I have 100% been in this situation before.
Yeah, I feel that too, especially as students. I guess that's what makes it kind of nice with school being online now. It makes period care a little bit easier.
For sure. It's a lot easier to be able to grab period products when you know that they're in your house or they're close by versus having to run to a bathroom and try and figure out where you might find a tampon or a pad.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I'm going to share the next one in a second. Number two.
I have 100% done this before. I've definitely been in situations where I'm not sure if my tampon or my pad has made it. And so trying to figure out how to do a secret check or make sure that you haven't bled through stuff without being super obvious about it, or if you've actually bled through to the chair, is very stressful. So I have also been in this situation before.
Yeah, me too. Like a couple weekends ago, I was going hiking with a friend, and on the trip back, I got really worried that I had just gotten my period. So I put a plastic bag on the seat too, just in case.
Oh no!
Thankfully, it was all good. I was just sweaty from the hike, but it was like a little bit alarming. Okay, thanks for that. So now we want to know a little bit about the story. So can you share with us how you became passionate about the issue of period poverty?
For sure. So a little bit about sort of myself and I guess my period. So my period has always been incredibly heavy, and to the point where it was really difficult to manage my period, especially when I was younger and trying to figure out what my cycle was like, and how heavy my period was going to be on any given day. And so my period was so heavy to the point where I would bleed through a box worth of tampons in one cycle. And the cost of that, especially going into university and high school, started to really add up, and it just wasn't financially sustainable for me. And so I am fortunate enough to have been, or to be in a position where I was able to get the support that I needed to be able to better manage my period. But I know that that's not the case for everybody. And so my own experiences with my period and, some of those memes, not being able to find a tampon when I needed it, especially with a really heavy flow, not sure if you've leaked through a seat or a chair, and not knowing where you're going to be able to get a tampon if you don't have any friends in the same class, or you don't know where the closest convenience store is, or even if the bathroom has a pad or tampon, can be really stressful. And it was really stressful and scary for me. And so I thought it was really important to try and figure out why our society seems to not talk about periods, seems not to value periods, despite it being a ubiquitous experience for so many people, for such a big portion of many people's lives. And so in terms of developing the period product program at the University of Calgary and putting forward this grant application, what I really wanted to do was to build on the work that had already been started by period advocates like Hilary Jahelka, who is the Vice President of Student Life at the Students' Union at the time, and make sure that the work that I was doing was work that would benefit the community and work that would benefit menstruators across campus, that anybody who needed period products could access them, regardless of who they are, what bathroom they use, or what their period is like.
Yeah, totally. And I think the like different elements of your personal experience that you shared are things that like I can relate to, and I'm sure a lot of our audience can also relate to, of like struggling to find the products. And like it's not only for us, whether people can access the product when like they're limited by financial constraints, but also just like timing constraints sometimes, like if it comes unexpectedly. So yeah, I think hearing your personal relationship to the period poverty and accessibility issue is something that we're really inspired by and can also relate to.
Oh, thank you. And I think too, it's important to recognize that some of the marginalized groups that benefit the most from menstrual equity and period poverty initiatives often aren't in positions or aren't able to advocate for changes to infrastructure, changes to bathrooms that make period products more accessible. And so while this project is something that I've started, my hope is that other people's experiences with period poverty and with menstrual equity can also help inform these types of projects too. Because I think my experience is my own experience, but everybody with a period has their own set of period stories and their own set of experiences that are just as important and valid.
Yeah, I like that you're touching on a point there that we're really passionate about and also curious to hear your perspective on, which is the inclusivity aspect to period care. How do you incorporate inclusivity in the pilot program and in the campaign that you've been running to combat period poverty?
Well, that's a great question. So one of the biggest and one of the most controversial pieces of the pilot project itself is actually putting menstrual product dispensers in all washrooms across campus. So when people think about where period product dispensers often are, they tend to be in women's bathrooms. But this project is a little bit unique in that it's putting period product dispensers in women's bathrooms, men's bathrooms, and all gender bathrooms. And the reason behind that is we know that not all bathrooms will have people who will use the products, but it's not so much about whether or not the products are used. For us, a lot of it is about starting a conversation around why periods are important, why menstrual equity is important, and why we as a society don't seem to talk about periods or value periods despite them happening to a large number of us. And so by being able to put period products in all bathrooms, regardless of gender, regardless of the bathroom that we use, we know that people will be able to access them, and people who perhaps don't need to use them will be able to have conversations about why are they here? Why do people use them? And why should we be talking about periods?
I love that. I was like smiling and nodding through it the whole time because I think it's so amazing that you're incorporating not only like the tangible product itself is there, but it serves as like that conversation piece, which is super critical to breaking the stigma around menstruation. So I love that. And what has been the response to the pilot program so far?
So when we first put the pilot program together, we were fortunate to have a huge amount of support from the campus community. So the actual pilot project grant itself involved over 20 letters of support from different clubs, faculty, staff, individuals on campus. So there was a lot of support already from the get-go for this project and for the grant application itself. And in terms of rolling out the project on campus, we've also gotten a lot of support and a lot of really positive feedback from people that would use the project people that are interested in the project, or people that are just generally very supportive of increased initiatives around menstrual equity on campus. That being said, though, a couple of weeks ago, a CBC article came out that featured my sister and I and the project that we were doing, and the comments on that article definitely showed us that there's still a long way to go in our society when it comes to breaking down stigmas around menstruation, talking about menstrual equity, and talking about why period poverty initiatives are still incredibly important. So I think the feedback on campus has been great. The feedback from the wider community shows us that we still have a lot of work that we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Can you share what your response is to maybe some of the negative feedback that you've received so far?
For sure. So we didn't engage directly with the comments that were on that article, but when there are people in our lives who have questions about period poverty or about menstrual equity or about even why this type of project is important, we like to start from just an educational background. So that periods are something that happen to a lot of people, not just women, but anybody that has a uterus has a period. And sometimes people need products, and we kind of equate it to, you would never want to be caught in a bathroom without toilet paper, especially if you needed it. And that kind of that sense of panic, that sense of emergency is ubiquitous in people who need period products but can't access them. They're unaffordable, or they're unable to find them in their immediate vicinity. And so a lot of our response to that type of pushback just comes from an educational perspective. But we understand that also too, the more that people start talking about periods, the more people work to break down that stigma, the more comfortable people will probably be overall with periods and period poverty, and breaking down those barriers to accessing menstrual products.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think coming at some of the feedback with like an education perspective is like one of the best ways to start changing the narrative around the conversation. So that's awesome. I know that you've touched on it a little bit already, but do you want to expand a little bit more on some of the challenges that you faced since starting the program? Was there anything unexpected? Or anything that you want to share about the challenges?
Absolutely. So the biggest challenge that we ran into, and this was in a sense self-imposed, was we wanted to make sure that this project could continue. So we knew from our research and from our interviews with individuals experiencing period poverty, and organizations in the Calgary community and elsewhere, that it's really important that when initiatives like these are started, they're able to continue. Initiatives that only occur for a couple of weeks or months at a time don't necessarily get to the root of period poverty, which is trying to support individuals who need menstrual products consistently over the course of their cycle. And so while an initiative that might be in place for a month might be really helpful for that 1 month, it was really important for us that there was a long-term solution on campus in bathrooms where people could access them to directly address menstrual equity. And so part of the challenge that we ran into was just making sure that we had adequate funding, that the people who needed to be on board to restock dispensers, to make sure this project would operate as we wanted it to, were also on board. And so it was a bit of a challenge getting all of those groups together and trying to coordinate the grant proposal, but we're really excited that at least for the next 3 years guaranteed, there will be period products at the University of Calgary in MacEwan Student Centre for anybody to use, regardless of the bathroom that they use or when they need them.
Yeah, and hearing you say that, it just seems like such a big win for everyone who menstruates. And I think just like for our Canadian community as a whole, because what you're doing with your school serves as an inspiration for a lot of other schools across Canada, including like the University of Alberta, where I graduated from. And yeah, I think that like seeing that, okay, this has been done here and it seems like there's a sustainable plan in place. It's just like really encouraging. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
For yourself, do you have any period life hacks or tips that you've used or have heard that are helpful?
I think, and this will sound sort of philosophical, but I think the most important thing that I've learned around managing my own period and managing what was a very heavy period for a very long time was not being afraid to take what you need during your period. Periods are really incredible when you think about the biology of them and their ability to generate life. And they are an incredibly intensive process for your body to go through. And people need different things on their period at different times during their cycles and during different cycles. And so being able to carve out what you need, whether that's space, whether that's rest, whether that's exercise, whether that's energy, being able to carve out that space and those boundaries is really important during your period. It's kind of a time of regeneration for your body and also to kind of check in with what's going on with your body and figure out what you need. And so that's kind of been my biggest takeaway from managing a period all these years, and especially having a period that is really heavy and can be really painful sometimes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think like even for myself, when I was starting out and having cramps, I think like I had a lot of hesitancy towards using any pain relief medication because I was really worried about like, oh, like will I become dependent on this? But then like hearing from more of like the scientific literature and then also like speaking with some medical professionals, they were sharing that it's okay to use pain relief medication on your periods because periods don't need to be painful. So I think that was like something for myself that I was like, oh, okay, like it doesn't have to be, this painful.
And I think that you've touched on something that's so important that people gloss over. We have this narrative in media and society that periods are supposed to be awful. Periods are supposed to hurt. You're supposed to bleed a lot. And what a lot of people don't understand is that's not what a normal period looks like. And we've been so conditioned either by the people that we've grown up around, by shows that talk about periods in really negative terms, that a period is something to A, be ashamed of, and B, something that you should suffer during. And it's not normal to have a painful period. It's not normal to bleed a lot. And it took me several years before I actually was able to find out why my periods were so heavy and were so painful, because I just thought that it was something that everybody went through and I thought that it was normal. And knowing that those experiences are not normal and really should be a reason to go to your family doctor and to get checked out. That's something that I wish I'd known a lot sooner. So I probably could have saved myself at least a few years of really uncomfortable periods.
Yeah, totally. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the community that I haven't been able to ask you about?
I think it's really easy to start your own menstrual equity initiatives, regardless of where you are, whether that's in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. This conversation only gets bigger when people are adding to it. And if you are in a community, if you're in a school where you think that a menstrual health equity or menstrual health initiative, menstrual equity initiative could be supportive or helpful to the people around you, then get that conversation started. I think the menstrual equity space is a really exciting one to be in right now because there are conversations, not just in Calgary, not just in Alberta, but around the world about how important period care and period advocacy is. And so I think the more people that are interested and the more people that are having these conversations, the easier it will be to break down the stigma that we currently have around menstruation.
Yeah, 100%. And what are your like biggest goals when it comes to reducing the stigma around menstruation as well as upholding the period equity movement? Like if you could dream super big, what would you say are your like moonshot goals?
Well, I'd love Canada to follow, and not just Alberta, but Canada to follow in the footsteps of countries like New Zealand and Scotland that have already taken steps to make period products free and accessible to anybody who needs them in public spaces. I think that's an incredible direction. I think that's the direction that Canada should be moving towards. And I think more generally, I'd love to be able to talk about my period openly with people that I meet, to be able to go to work and explain, why my period, that I'm currently on my period, and have that just be something that's accepted and recognized. I think part of the stigma that we have around periods is people are afraid to talk about what a period means and share that they're on their period. And I'd love for that stigma to just be broken down and go away, and for us to talk about periods like we do about other parts of our body and other things that we experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think both of the things that you shared about like being more open to the conversation, as well as seeing Canada follow in those footsteps of offering free menstrual products. Those are two things that we also are championing for at Ruth. So, yeah, I think that's it from me. Yeah, is there any last thought that you'd like to share before we end off?
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited to see sort of what the future of period advocacy and menstrual equity looks like.